And good evening to you. My name is Maggie Mutesi. It's Real Talk, and as usual, we're coming to you from Lemigo Hotel. Now, joining me on this particular episode is Peter Baofu. Hope I got the pronunciations right. Unusual about Africa.
Oh, there are a lot of different things. Let me give you one example. A lot of people used to have the perception that Africa is poor. Well, in a way it is, but in another way it's very rich. It's rich, let's say, in the mindset, in the culture, and the spirituality, which I think very interesting. So just one example.
So let's talk about the unusual project that brought you to Rwanda. I understand you're traveling back. What have you found unusual about Rwanda particularly?
There are a lot of different things over here which I have learned about Africa. For example, I have some conversation with people who also interviewed me about this before. And I told them, for example, that there are several things about Africa which I think they can learn more about and they can do something to improve. Number one, for example, is that they may want to diversify the economy, because there are one thing which a lot of African economies have in common. They are very dependent on raw materials. For example, let's say on minerals and some other things. I think that that's good about that. There is some of the natural resources which are very abundant in Africa. But I think that for the long-term development of Africa, they might want to diversify that. And number two, which I found that very unusual too, is that when I speak to a lot of different people, sometimes I notice that they have the tendency to expect other organization, international organization, United Nations, or even foreign powers to come here for foreign aid to help out. I think that's also very important to help Africa. But I think that this kind of dependency can hurt Africa in the longer term.
In what way?
When you become too dependent, let's say, on foreign resources, when you become too dependent, let's say, on the raw materials, you may not be able to develop, let's say, as China has, for example, or Japan has, or Germany, for example. So if you want to have a long-term economic development, I think that it's important also to look into the long term, not in the short term. And that's number two, for example. And then number three, I think that's also very important. When I interview a lot of people, and they interview me, for example, and they often talk about, let's say, to learn from other countries, to learn from the West, to learn from China and all that. But I think that one thing which they need to ask is to ask about the African identity, which is uniquely to Africa. And then this is a much more important question to ask in the longer term.
All these theories are so unusual. I'll still stick to unusual, but thank you so much for having time to sit down with us.
Thank you very much.
And that's all we had for you on Real Talk. Keep watching RTV. My name is Maggie Mutesi. Good night.